Welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast. Along with my partner, Brian Siegler, I am Curtis Wilson. This episode is brought to you by Dr. Lord Jeremy Counts at Main Street Pharmacy in Blacksburg. If you love this podcast, if you love the Hokies, if you love the town of Blacksburg, make sure you are supporting Main Street Pharmacy whenever you make your way to town.
And like we said last episode, we got some stickers there down at the pharmacy. Go see Jeremy. Tell him that Boundary Corner sent you. Get yourself a free Boundary Corner podcast sticker. So head on down to 301 South Main Street in Blacksburg. Buddy, you made it here under the wire.
Sliding in. Youth baseball on a Tuesday night, 7:20 first pitch. Ooh, barely made it in. But I'm here.
You snuck her in.
We're live.
We only went about 15 minutes later than we were hoping for, which, considering the late start and all that, not bad. Not
bad at all. And we thought about maybe moving it to Wednesday, but then that would give me 3 extra late nights. And I was like, nah, screw that. Tuesday's going to be late regardless. Let's just go. Let's talk about everything college football. Let's talk about Georgia Tech this week. Let's talk about the CFP in a little while here. Let's talk about the new Big 12 deal. But, Brian, let's kick it off and let's go back. More heartbreak for the Hokies. Let's recap NC State. Hokies fall 22-21 on Thursday night. And it's one of those stories where it wasn't like Miami. It wasn't us clawing our way back. 18-point lead in the later part of the third, and we blow it, man. Just brutal. I went to bed at like 1 because it took a while to come down.
Oh yeah. I think it was while they were reviewing the Grant Wells touchdown that gave us that lead. I ran upstairs to give my wife something. I was like, I'm not trying to jinx this shit, but we're up 18. I didn't think we'd be here.
I don't know what to do.
Essentially, I was like, I don't know what to do with my hands.
I don't know what to do with my hands. Yay!
And then I come up later. It's after midnight. She's like, how'd it finish out? I was like, it's after midnight. What the fuck do you think happened?
What do you think happened? It's midnight. Well, man, I had a few guys in the neighborhood over, and 2 of my neighbors, shout out Ben, shout out Mason, they're Tech alums. And the other 2 guys aren't. And when we went up 18, one of the non-Hokies said, y'all got this in the bag, 18. And Ben looked at him, shot a look like, you haven't watched us play this year, have
First
you?
time, huh?
And thus began the roll down. And
not just this year, man. I mean, we've seen this movie play out for a while for the Hokies. So I mean, as soon as that first touchdown happened, and with the ease that it happened, I was like, "Oh, okay, we're in for a long fourth quarter."
We are, and we were.
Win or lose, it's going to be way more interesting than it should be.
A lot more interesting. And let's talk about this. Let's talk about the defense, because I want to give the defense. I want to give them their kudos first. Oh, Coach Compton. All right, Robbie. So let's talk about the defense. So for the better part of 3 quarters, they absolutely got the job done. They held NC State to 3 points. Aggressive play calling against NC State. They were attacking, it seemed like, all night. We didn't – fewer missed tackles in the first 3 quarters than we'd seen probably
for the last few weeks at least.
Yeah, for the last few weeks, definitely. And it seems like they were just loose.
Yeah.
Right?
Playing loose. They weren't looking at the scoreboard. They were just kind of attacking and following the game plan and playing like they belonged.
Yeah. Playing like they belong. And we know Devin O'Leary wasn't there. We know it was Chambers in the first, and then the rook or Morris, the freshman, who was a 4-star. It's not like he was a 2-star. He was a 4-star out of Georgia.
He wasn't just holding down that 3rd spot. He was a solid player that probably just maybe wasn't ready for prime time yet, but
and they pushed him.
He showed up anyway.
He did show up anyway. But again, the defense those first three quarters, even with Mason in there, they couldn't get anything established. And it felt good, but Brian, you made that point. As it got to the end of the third and then the fourth, it just kind of fell off 19. Roughly they had 19 points in 8 minutes. 19 points in 8 minutes. And I know you got to see some of the tape. What do you felt like was the swing? Why did we quit attacking?
I feel like it's a combination of things. You got to lead. You end up being a little more conservative, trying to conserve, the depth that we have, because we still have depth problems on defense, and in this game we especially had depth problems at corner. We only had really 4 cornerbacks available that are on scholarship, so that kind of put us behind the 8 ball with how we were deploying our cornerbacks, and as they started taking some more shots, that became problematic. It was like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you blitz and you don't get there, you got tired cornerbacks on islands. If you play more conservative, you let them kind of take chunks down the field a little bit at a time. And we kind of got in a situation where the snowball started and we couldn't stop it.
Yeah, and it sort of stinks because I think the reason probably we went to zone, you mentioned it, we heard Coach Pride mention it today in the presser, was the depth. Amani Chapman and Masan Delaney played every snap, and we were over 76. Brian made the point Friday when we were chatting. He's like, "Did you see the difference in the plays?" I'm like, and I looked at the wrong stats. I'm like, they're pretty close, Brian. He's like, look again. They ran 76, we ran 54. And Mansour Delane and Armani were out there every snap, which when you're down to 4, we saw DJ Harvey play a lot at nickel. We did not see much Breon Murray. So really it was only 3 guys getting the majority of those snaps.
Yeah, Cam and
Cam's out.
Cam Johnson, Alvis, both of them were late scraps.
Also Strong.
Yeah, Strong was obviously already out for. So you had three guys that could have helped you a little bit depth wise that weren't able to go going into that game. It was tough.
Absolutely gone. And then it was, Coach said it today in the press. I don't know if anybody listened, about learning how to win games. And he says it's something we have to do as a team. And you know what? Before this season started, we were roughly, I think it was 1 game under 500 with the class of 18. That's basically a coin flip whether you win or not. And Brian, how did you say it on Friday about that big play down the field?
I basically say this, like once they got that one big play down the field and then they got in the end zone, it was like we remembered that we weren't as good as we had been playing for 3 quarters.
And that's that mentality that we keep hearing about, learning how to win, learning how to finish. Dude, you played collegiate ball. And your teams were good. Your own teams that competed in the ODAC, trying to win that conference. It is something. Some people say it's fictitious. I don't believe that. I believe every single sport you ever play, you have to learn how to win. And that is something we don't have right now. And it showed. Maybe the silver lining is the last 3 weeks, it showed a little bit more that we were getting closer. Yeah. It went from losing by 2 scores at Pitt to 1 score at Miami to 1 point at NC State.
Yeah, and it's, when you talk about winning, it's the little things. When you look at the plays that kind of build towards your win, there are points in the game where you kind of point to and say, okay, well, you make a little play here, you make a little play there, it's a different outcome. But you see winning teams that they play with a different type of confidence and a different type of swagger than teams like the Hokies right now, where when one bad thing happens, you start to see that snowball effect. You start to see doubt creeping in. You start to press a little bit and make mistakes that you wouldn't normally make. And that's what we're seeing a lot from this team, is that they kind of get a little bit over their skis and all of a sudden one snowball becomes another. Yep.
It's a snowball effect. Exactly. That's the thing. You talk about getting over their skis. They lose the technique. they start playing outside themselves, not within themselves, not within the scheme. And that's learned. And, we see mistakes and stuff this year. And I'm not calling for anybody's job this year because I've seen enough from each member of the coaching staff that when they get the right players, when that mentality, well, we talked about it last week. I talked about it with the Moore brothers, who had the least amount of time under the old coaching staff, and they have looked like two of the best offensive linemen we have, and that takes time. And obviously, probably what hurts the most is we punt with 6 minutes left and we never get the ball back.
Yeah,
one stop.
That was the big thing
One
for the
stop.
defense. We just needed one stop. We got them to third down twice. Couldn't get off the field.
Couldn't finish it. Now, let's talk about the offense because, Jesus Christ, let's talk Jekyll Hyde with this offense. That first half, they knew everything we were doing. They took away the run game. They took away the short passes.
Yep.
They dared us to beat them downfield. And from what I can remember and what you've seen, we really didn't try that in the first half.
We didn't try it enough or with enough variation. When we took the shots, it was kind of a little bit more calculated. We weren't doing it off of first down, where maybe the defense wasn't expecting it as much. We were doing it in very telegraphed ways. Definitely third down. We were trying to take some shots here and there when we had third down and long situations, but we weren't trying to catch them off guard or get that first down big play that can kind of set your offense in motion.
True.
We were very predictable, and it showed the way they reacted. I mean, I know that's a good defense, but we should have. The first half should not have been as bad as it was if we would have done some things differently that took them off edge a little bit.
Absolutely, that's the truth. But then, Brian, we talk about that, and then we see, and this is these little things we see. We see an absolute 180 in the adjustment, and when we come out in that third quarter, we get the ball, 6 plays, 78 yards, under 2 minutes, and score a touchdown. I mean, it was.
That opening third quarter drive, I said it was the best opening drive we've had of the season. It's probably the best offensive drive we've had all year.
Very true.
In terms of execution, in terms of keeping the defense off balance, it was the best drive on offense we've had all year.
Yeah, and if you take a look at it, it was Wells running the ball, and then he hits Daquan, and then Daquan again, then Malachi with a good 6-yard run. And then the next thing you know, it's a penalty. We get downfield, and then we're inside the goal line. Grant runs it in. And it was like it was nothing was huge. It was, 15, 7, 8, penalty gets you 15 more, and then you're in. Yep. It wasn't, it wasn't like the next drive that we got.
I mean, we got those like intermediate chunk plays that we haven't been consistent enough in this offense. We need a lot more of those type of routes, those type of schemes in the passing game, and we need that more consistently because that seems to be our bread and butter. Whether it's Daquan, whether it's working Caleb Smith in there as well, we need more of that. We've been relying too much on kind of the short game and hoping that we can, break a tackle or matriculate the ball down the field 6 to 8 yards at a time. I mean, eventually we need to start getting those 15 to 20 yard chunk plays consistently. I'm not saying we got to do what we did on the next drive all the time, but let's start moving the ball downfield a little bit with a little bit more confidence in that intermediate game.
Absolutely. And then the next drive, I mean, home run. Those intermediate routes opened up. That safety didn't shade to Caleb's side, and it was a perfect – I mean, that was a beautiful, beautiful deep pass because Grant dropped it in the bucket. Caleb didn't break stride. 80-yard touchdown. One play, 11 seconds.
Yeah. That's what and that's how you take the momentum from the other team right there. I mean, you get
Absolutely.
the one score, obviously that changes the game. You get that second one, now you got a team on their back of their heels a little bit, um, and you get it in one play there. So that really kind of was the first huge play that we've had since really Boston College, in terms of like really big chunk play going for a touchdown.
Yep, absolutely. And then now the next drive was a punt, but Brian, me and you talked about today how it's okay to punt sometimes, but how much positive yards did you get? Well, we got 23 positive yards. So, they had a punt to us. We got the ball roughly let me do the math here, roughly at like the 25-yard line. We went 23 yards right at midfield. We punted. They got the ball at their 20. Then they had a punt back. And then it was that last really, again, it was another solid drive. 5 plays, 65 yards. Again, Grant running. Don't worry, we're going to talk about some of the bad stuff, folks. We're going to lay into us too, but it was like 3 minutes, bam, bam, bam. Grant Wells 20-yard run, touchdown. And that's where you're pulling your hair out, because in less than 8 minutes we scored 21 points.
Yep.
In 8 minutes we scored 21 points. That's of the game clock. Actual clock, like 6 minutes. Brian, if we can score 21 points in 6 minutes every game, at least once.
Yep. Well, can I tell you one thing here though? Is
Yeah.
that this tells you the importance of getting a first down on your to start a drive, because we went tempo on most of these drives in the third quarter, and we were able to go tempo because we were able to get a first down pretty quickly in the drive,
By the
and
second play.
Yeah,
By the second play in those two drives.
And get up on the ball and keep them on their heels. It was less check with me as we were going through there, so they were running quickly. They were sticking with the original call, and they played with as much confidence as I've seen them play all year on offense.
Yeah. And we saw some more different things on, Thursday night. I mean, I think one of the big one was just seeing Grant uses athleticism. He has some. He can run the ball a little bit. And there were a couple times where he handed off. If he had pulled, he would have had a lot of daylight. Because a couple times those ends and those outside backers just crashed. If he pulls, it's a lane, and there's no one on that side of the field. So I think that's got to be continued to put in. What else did you see for little new wrinkles?
Yeah, I mean, they had more unbalanced lines. We saw that might be something that we could catch them in when we were talking in the preview episode there, and they went that way. So it's good to see that they, watched the Syracuse tape like I did. Grant was more involved in the running game, so that was good as well. He's been more involved week to week lately. Various degrees of effectiveness. Obviously, when they've got the loaded box, a lot less room for him to operate. We saw that kind of in the first half, but as we were more effective with other aspects of the offense, some of those rushing lanes opened up for him in the second half there. And obviously, we've already talked about it. The second half shots downfield, we need more of that, more consistently. Grant throws a good deep ball, especially when he's got time. He's connected on quite a few here. He sails a couple here or there, but when he's got time, when he's able to throw one-on-one, he throws a pretty good one. So we need more of that.
I mean, is that something you want to see early though? Is that something that you feel if we take a shot early and hit one, the safeties won't creep up, linebackers won't be sticking their nose in the gaps? It's like we get burned deep a couple times. You've got to change your philosophy up. And it did kind of change their philosophy up, but we couldn't get anything done the rest of the game. We were struggling because essentially we played our hand, we played our trump cards, and they knew what we were going to do, so they were able to adjust. So somebody could say, did you do it Did we do it too early? I don't think that's
I
such a
wouldn't say
thing.
we did it too early. I would say we need to be able to be good on first and second down, even when we're not calling shots downfield. Because our problem right now has been we're very ineffective rushing on first down. So that puts us in a bad second down call that doesn't always work. And now we're in third and medium, third and long situations where, we've struggled off and on. And we struggled on third down mightily in this game.
Oh my God, did we? Not even a joke. How bad? 9%.
Yeah.
We converted 9%. We converted 1/3 down compared to them almost converting 45%. That
Yep.
magic 40 number, Brian, continues to. He floated out there. If we keep them 40 or under, we're going to win games. We're going to win games.
And that's as simple as getting off the field one or two more times on third down. And we came close 2 or 3 times in that game to getting off the field. But
and if
close
you do
doesn't matter. Close doesn't matter. You got to get it done.
Close doesn't matter at all. And didn't rush the ball good again. Just 1.9 per carry. After adjustments off 26 rushes. And what a lot of blew up in the subsequent evening, we should just say late night hours, and the next day was what's on the coaches, what's on the players. And, let's talk about some of that. We're going to talk about first the game management on the coaches. And the first big one, and again, I'm going to shout him out, Mason. He sits over there on the 2-point conversion and says, why the heck are we calling a timeout? They're going to go for 2 here to get it down to 3 points. Why do we have call a timeout? That obviously using that hurt in the 6-minute drill. We had 1 timeout to burn at that point in time. If you have to, maybe you do get to stop. Or maybe they get in field goal range and they have to kick a field goal with a minute left and you still have time to operate. Now, Pride did mention today that had the wrong personnel on the field, and at that point in time, those 2 points were too important. At that point in time, and I like he said at that point in time, because at that point in time it was. If they don't get the 2 points like they didn't, it was still a 2-possession game, or essentially it was they could not tie with a field goal. They had to score a touchdown. But on the other hand, this is something where it's like that learning experience for a first-time head coach. Dude, you've got your players out there. This is becoming a tight game. Timeouts are important, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that's after you probably you burned one that you needed to earlier, but then that meant that you couldn't afford to burn another one ahead of the final drive as things got tighter. Timeouts are at a premium. It's one of those things I know, hindsight's 2020. It's like, oh yeah, we should have conserved that one. Yeah, and I think we should have. Sometimes I think that's where being a coordinator versus being a head coach kind of comes into play. I think that's a timeout that a coordinator wanted to take that a head coach might kind of say, nah, we're just going to let this one roll.
We're still going to have the lead regardless what they do.
Yeah.
We're going to have the lead. If I have this in my back pocket, if we're driving the field and it is a 1-point game and we need a field goal, we have 2 times where we can really attack the middle of the field and just burn the timeout and get set up for the next play.
And then that gives you a chance to potentially get off the field late in the game and have a chance to work into field goal range. Whether it's a 1 or 2 point game at that point, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. Now, let me ask this, and you said this was big on your game management piece, is you said Brent Pry trusted his defense to win the battles when we had the lead instead of staying aggressive. Is that going back to him being a coordinator again versus being a head coach, where if he's the head coach and Chris Morris is the DC and Chris lays back that one play, he's taking his hat off and saying, attack. I don't care about this sitting. Attack. I don't care if you have to put guys who are inexperienced in. Attack. And we know at the end of this season he will no longer be the defensive coordinator and calling the plays. But again, is that the coordinator hat finding its way?
I think it's some of that. I think it's, we talked about it earlier with wanting to keep guys fresh. I think he was attempting to kind of stem the tide, as it were.
Yeah.
With, we're probably our thinnest at the defensive line and in the secondary, especially at corner in this game. And you take your foot off the gas a little bit there, trying to kind of keep your guys fresh, but now you've given them confidence, and I think all they needed was like a little spark of confidence, and that kind of woke them up a little bit. And it also reminded our guys, hey, you're the team rolling in here with the losing record while we're still ranked in the top 25. And it kind of showed from there on out. Even when Pride got more aggressive as we kind of went down the stretch there, I just think that little moment almost was like a switch for both teams.
Yep.
And anybody that says momentum isn't a thing doesn't watch college football.
Doesn't watch sports. Doesn't watch. Well, I don't have it on back here, but I just looked. Houston had all the momentum after the weekend, right?
Yep.
That game got canceled last night because it rained in Philly all night. Philly came out today, and they're blowing the doors off of them. It's 7-0 so far. I wish I had it on back here so I could halfway watch the game.
And Philly was able to line up their pitching better long term for the rest of the series too.
Momentum. All right, let's talk about quickly the offensive side of the ball. All right, how tough is it? You mentioned to me it's like he was too late adjusting to the box. How tough is it for, obviously this is the first time coordinator to make that adjustment in the box down to the field? Is it too big of an adjustment, or is it something where a more seasoned guy would just say, we've got to change it, I don't care, I would rather die by taking the risk that I know if we make this change, we maybe can make a touchdown or we can move the ball?
I still feel like we're not, because we're not doing some of the things that he wants us to do well, we're not opening up the playbook enough or throwing in enough new elements to the offense week to week. And when you have a loaded box like that and your bread and butter's trying to be, all right, we're going to run it, we're going to have play action. And I know if you want to have play action, that you want that to be your bread and butter in the passing game, it's hard for that to actually have as much juice if you don't have some sort of semblance of a running game. But at some point, you got to recognize what the strengths and weaknesses of the offense are and start playing towards those. And I think we're too late doing that in a lot of games. And that's what we saw in this game. And by the time, we played our pivot card, they adjusted. They were able to fight their way back. Our defense had got gassed, and they scraped one out there. And he's never really gotten the offense settled after the Thomas injury in this game, because that felt like another switch for the offense. We were kind of cooking a little bit, and then when Thomas went down, we kind of we did look like a different team out there. And I know Thomas wasn't exactly tearing it up rushing the ball, but he had a couple good grabs in the running game, especially that one down the sideline.
Amazing grab down the side. That was an amazing catch.
So he gives the offense a little bit of a spark that, especially in this game when you didn't have Keyshawn King and you had Holston coming on in the game after that, you could really see how that impacted the offense. It just looked like they kind of became a shell of what they showed in the third quarter.
Well, it's that whole piece of we aren't as good as what we've been playing. That 8 minutes, and then Malachi gets hurt, and it's the snap back to reality moment of we're not as good as what we've just did. Those big plays, those solid runs, those drives, we're not that. And to me that is somewhat on coaching. I know it's some player mentality, but it's also coaches continue to chirp in your ear. Now,
well, it's Bowen's responsibility to get some plays in there that keep your guys confident.
That's true. That's on him. Now, Brian, you got into it pretty much. Well, no, Brian just made a defiant statement that about false starts because there are some things that were on the players Thursday. 10 false start penalties, 6 on the line, 2 on skill positions, 2 on special teams. Brian, someone came out and said, this is all bad coaching. And Brian Siegler you went Lee Corso.
Yeah, not so fast. So I'll preface it by this. There are things that can be done that will encourage an offensive line to try to be more cognizant about false starts. But a offensive lineman is not jumping off sides because of something a coach does or does not do. Point blank. I played the position. I know this.
And the reason,
and so the things that you can do as a coach is that obviously one of the things they are doing, which is extra conditioning, punishment, things like that, as a response to offsides that occur in a game.
Wait a second. Another offensive lineman, Dwight Dick speaks up. It's the offensive line.
So the things you can do is, obviously one of the things they are doing, which is extra conditioning for yards that you commit in penalties in a game. The other thing that you can do is you can lose your spot. The problem with losing your spot is that we don't have the depth to have someone lose their spot right now.
No,
when someone loses their spot on this offensive line, and even at other positions in this offense, you're talking about replacing them with a true freshman, which could result in a burnt red shirt or a walk-on.
I mean, you're getting all sorts of good stuff. We got 2 right here. One from Robbie, one from Dwight again. Robbie basically pre-snap penalties. Oh, Robbie, throw that one up there. Every Hokie fans knows that this year, and it's not all coaching. Robbie obviously is a coach. Throw that other one by the White up. And we've heard this since day one about the depth. So.
We've heard it since day one, and I get what they're saying. If we had a team like you would want to have, and a guy jumps off sides twice in a game, yank him at least for the end of the quarter and put in the other guy and see what you got. And if that guy's rolling, you keep him in maybe for the rest of the game. and that shows that you're serious, but we don't have the luxury of that type of response from a coaching staff right now.
No,
so these linemen need to take accountability for jumping off sides. And I'll say this, it wasn't just the linemen. Daquan jumped off. We had a wide receiver jump off.
Caleb jumped off. Caleb jumped off.
We had three or four that weren't on the offensive line. So this is not just an offensive line problem. This is a concentration problem. This is thinking too much problem. This is worrying about beating your guy instead of focusing on what's happening in the game problem.
Very, very true. It's also funny. Put Robbie's quote up here again, because you said this, and it's really funny because Pry continued to say offsides with false starts. And I was like, is he talking that backwards? But I think that's just something common. But you mentioned during when we were talking Friday,
I put it in the tweet too.
Yes, you did. A lot of times, why would I get false starts? Because the freaking D tackle in front of me was feeding my ass.
I'm getting my ass kicked, and I'm trying to get a step on his ass this play. whether it's I'm trying to kick back early, or whether I'm trying to get a zone step or a reach step, or I'm trying to down block him at the right. I'm trying to get a step on my man because he's handing me my ass right now.
Yep. All right, a couple other things, Brian. Let's mention about on the players. Chance Black muffin those kickoffs. First of all, anytime a kickoff is muffed, any kind of kick is muffed. It's just like, as a fan, it's like, oh shit, not good, not good at all.
It's bad because it automatically takes away some of the potential that the plays in your playbook that you want to call as an offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Because now you're starting inside the 10. Those play calls are going to be a lot more conservative most times, especially for a team like this that hasn't had a ton of success with just lining up and doing what they do to a defense, regardless of what kind of looks they're getting. We don't have that kind of offense right now. So now you either take the risk of taking shots from inside the 10, and if you don't hit it, now you're punting to them, in that 40 to 50 yard range, or you're risking a safety in a tight game and things like that, or you get more conservative till you get that first down or two, and we never got that. Now we got handed a gift that we ended up giving back on the next couple plays.
True.
On that penalty.
True.
On the late hit on Wells out of bounds. Well, wasn't a late hit necessarily, but the unnecessary roughness of throwing him around after he rode him out of bounds.
Peyton Wilson had him. If he just lets him go and rides, it's nothing. But when he jerked, they weren't going.
He didn't initiate that action before he went out of bounds. So
it was the steps were out. And I think the last thing, Brian, Coach Prize said it, you said it. It's all the pressing, and it's the pressing is when you start pressing, the technique's gone. You don't play within the structure, and bad things happen. And I go back to what I think about this class being under 500 going into this year. I don't think a lot of these guys who have been playing here for the last 4 years, guys, you come to love, you love to see them play, you want to see them do well. I think that is what it is. And I think it's literally going to take a lot of new blood to flush that out of the system.
Well, I've said it a lot, and I know I'm kind of reiterating some of the stuff I've already said elsewhere, but we've got a lot of veterans that have played, that have been role players on this team, that we are asking them this year because of our depth concerns to be the man at certain positions. And some of that may be beyond their skill set. And we're talking about spreading that out, not just at one position, not just at two positions, but probably over about 5 or 6 positions. We're asking guys that are more veteran role players to be veteran leaders and veteran standout players on this team. And that works for a quarter or two, but we're seeing it doesn't always work for 4 quarters.
That's it.
And that's what we're seeing a lot of. So when you see these young guys going out there and competing, that's a good sign, because it shows that we could have that potential down the road, but we've got a lot of backfilling to do.
We do,
and it's going to take. We talked about it last week. It's going to take the portal and
cycles
and the cycles to backfill kind of the situation that we've kind of been dealt with the last 2 to 3 years of recruiting and way the roster has been managed in those periods,
which was not good. But you kind of started it right there. But I think we, as fans, everybody's pissed we're 2-6. I think because we're a little.
I mean, I'm pissed we're 2-6. Of course,
we're 2-6. I think us being a little older, we start reading between the lines, because the record is what it is. We're 2-6. That's who we are. But if you start looking at this team and the record, we have only been truly drilled once, and that was Carolina. They were 24-10 at half. They won 41-10. We were drilled. The game was over early third quarter.
It wasn't close for a long time.
Yeah, it wasn't close for a long time. But you kind of sit back and say, Brian, a lot of these other games, it's right there. And at the end, it falls apart. And there are quarters where me and you both say, if that team right there, third quarter this week, if that team right there showed up 75% of the time, we would be winning 75 or 80% of our games, like those quarter stretches. Now, the defense, we've seen it multiple quarters. We saw it against Miami. We saw it against State. We saw it the first 3 quarters against West Virginia.
The defense has consistently put 2 and 3 quarters together in a game.
Not
they haven't
4.
necessarily played 4 yet.
BC.
4
BC.
Great quarters.
BC
Yeah, I'll give them BC. I'll give them BC.
But we know how bad BC is. So
yeah.
But with the offense, it's like one-off quarters. And when I say one-off quarters, I mean this week, that third quarter, 8 minutes, 21 points.
Yeah.
8 minutes of the game, 6 minutes of possession, 21 points. I ain't trying to say we're Alabama, but that's Alabama shit. That's Tennessee shit. That's Ohio State shit, where it's like bam, 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 21 points, 6 minutes, and that's how they bury you. But you look at that game, the Miami fourth quarter, the early first quarter into the second at Pitt, where it's just like 14 points, 17 points in short stretches. So I sit here and it's like a silver lining, and I say, people are already saying Tyler Bowen should be fired. No. First of all, I don't think anybody's getting fired year one. If that's your go-to, like we should fire people. Go look at Tennessee. Go look at a lot of these programs that took years, that took 15 years to rebuild where they are. They kept firing people over and over. But I look at it and you see those silver linings in its consistency, right, Brian? Like we've seen flashes, and it's like, shit.
And I think that goes back to what I was just saying earlier, as like, you know, we're seeing these flashes, and we're hoping that we can put some of that more together. When we say we're not seeing progress, I think we're not seeing progress because we're still losing games. But there are things here or there that give you, you know, a little hope of what's to come. Now, what I want to see a lot more of is, you know, when we talked back in March, early March, we did the preview episode with Robbie. Robbie came on. He broke down what we can expect from Pryor on the defense. I looked at the offense. I looked at a lot of Fordham tape, looked at some of the Penn State stuff, things like that. And looking at Fordham, you know, we saw some different things from that offense that we haven't seen yet in this one. And I don't know if that is we're not doing this well, so we haven't kind of taken the next step and put this part of the offense in there yet. I don't know whether it's that some of the team isn't comfortable with running those plays yet, hasn't shown it well enough in practice where they're comfortable with the calls in the game. Whatever the reason is, I want to see a little bit more from this offense in terms of when that bread and butter isn't working early, having something to pivot to, having some things that give the defense fits that aren't just we're going to do what we do, and beat you that way. Because one of my complaints against Corn had a bad system and was also a bad play caller.
Yeah, I still think the system was decent. I think he was
the system is, but I'm saying in terms of how he operated the system, with if it's a pass play, you got to throw it here, or then you got to run it or eat it.
Yeah,
I don't like that shit. So that's still on him, and that's not just a calling the game thing. That's a this is how I want to run my scheme thing.
Yeah, I got you.
The scheme itself, in terms of the plays, were not bad. It was how he wanted the quarterback to execute said calls that was awful. Combined that with having zero flow in the game,
and that's something I think we don't see from Tyler Bowen. He lets Wells operate.
He lets Wells operate. Now the problem is that we haven't gotten deep enough into the playbook where, you know, what we've shown on film is almost kind of what we see
every game
in the game. And I need to see more variety and some more wrinkles from this offense. And we're seeing them here or there, but I don't think we're seeing enough where it's giving us an advantage against the defense week to week.
And I'm going to be just very honest with you on that. You go 4 games, you're 2-6. Nothing can get worse. If you're trying to figure out how if Wells is going to be your primary starter next year, he's going to battle for a job, it's almost like rip the Band-Aid off and just give him everything and see how the offense works. Because by all means, if you lose 4 in a row, you lose 4 in a row. You're 2-6. To me, there is nothing to lose. And at least with this, you get a full scope of Grant Wells operating everything in the playbook, not just inside the box.
Yeah.
All right. Let's flip it over, Brian. Other college football notes. Obviously, tonight I had to have you texted. I had a couple buddies. Malik might text me like, what do y'all think of the playoff? I'm like, I haven't seen it yet. This is literally me the first time seeing it right now. And I'm actually proud of the committee putting Tennessee at 1, Ohio State at 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, and Michigan 5. Tennessee has beat multiple ranked football teams.
Yep.
Multiple. And Ohio State has beat multiple ranked. Notre Dame doesn't look as good, but the Penn State victory last week, obviously really good. I think they got it right. I really do. And obviously, if you take a look at that, we've got 2 play-in games on the way in the next month. ones this weekend. We're going to talk about that one later. Trust us. What about you? Do you think it's right? Do you like Clemson being at 4, or would you have put Michigan there?
I would have put Michigan there. I thought Michigan was going to be 4. I like it otherwise. I mean, I could make an argument for Georgia over Ohio State, but they're very neck and neck in my opinion. Tennessee has the best resume. I don't know if they're the best team, but they certainly have the best resume,
They do.
which is why they are number 1, and that's a fair number 1 for them. Like I said, I could argue Georgia at 2 or Ohio State at 2. I think Clemson is probably the only one they got wrong at this point. I would definitely put them kind of just outside looking in the initial poll. I think Michigan's kind of done more so far.
Okay.
And I think I'd put them behind Michigan, and obviously Alabama's number 6 here, so I'd put them just ahead of Alabama.
Oh, are they now?
Unblemished record.
Are they now? Wait a second. So an undefeated team is below
Behind
a one-loss Alabama.
Yep. TCU's below Alabama. Yep.
That's always irritating to me. So TCU has not been proven they can be beaten, correct? Alabama has. Alabama has shown they can lose a game. TCU's not. If you flip-flop them, I'm fine with that. I think Oregon's too high. I don't think you get the doors blown off of you, even if it's early in the season. I don't think they should be that high. I think at least USC, Ole Miss should be above them. Probably no one else. I don't know how a 2-loss LSU team, because LSU is still not impressed. They lost to a mediocre Florida State team at home pretty much. But we'll discuss that more as we get down to it.
There's definitely some SEC biases playing in there, but it is what it is. I mean, you look at that Florida State team. I mean, it's a better than we expected Florida State team, but still nothing to write home about Florida State team.
Yeah. Now, if this was the 12 team, there would be games in Ann Arbor, Tuscaloosa, Fort Worth, and at the Autzen Zoo. Just, I'm always talking about that, man.
Crank it up. Crank it up. That's a good one.
Could you imagine a team like UCLA having to go to Ann Arbor in early December? 0 degrees.
That would be amazing.
That would be great. All right.
Or like, some team on the East Coast having to go to the Autzen Zoo.
Well, that would be USC. I don't think they have it that way. They'd probably flip it, put like LSU there to go up to the zoo.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. So it's interesting. All right. Other big news this week. The Big 12's new TV deal. The dominoes are slowly falling. $2.28 billion over 6 years between Fox and ESPN. I'd love to see the numbers from each, because obviously the math is roughly $30 million a year. I think Big 12 is saying closer to 50 with all the other payouts. Well, we're looking strictly at the TV money, because the other payouts are variable.
Yep.
You may get some of it, you may not get some of it. So keep that off the table. But let's say it's split right down the middle.
Some of it's a straight share. Some of it depends on
where you land. Exactly. But if we just say it's a straight middle and it's 1.14 billion, we know that 1.14 billion for ESPN. I'm focused more on ESPN than Fox, because Fox has the Big 10, they have the Big 12. The Pac-12's deal is still not done.
Yep.
Which is really, and this is a good size deal, but now, 1.14 is roughly how much a year? God, I hate doing math this late. If I had a chance to do this earlier,
if we're doing straight split, wouldn't it be 15?
What, 15? Well, no, what I'm saying is how much money each year ESPN is going into it.
Gotcha.
It'd be something like 200, probably right under 200 million a year. So close to 15 a year per payout. But what that tells you right there, though, is they still got money left.
Yeah.
I think they're going to bump the SEC up, but I think the AC, even though they're locked into the 15-year deal, ESPN is going to probably pay a little bit more. I think the ACC's with the ACC network going full live is close to 30 million now. I think that's what it is, like 27 and a half. I think the ACC will get a little bit more. They'll probably, to me, I think the ACC is going to be probably closer to 37 straight TV deal. But this is what we talked about, because the Big Ten's gone. ESPN does not have the Big Ten in a few years. And it was all that money. And they bid up to a point, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70 million a team. And now that money's coming back. So it's going to be interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. What do they do with that extra money? Does a cut of that go to the ACC in a renegotiated deal? Does all of that go to the SEC?
I don't think it all can go to the SEC.
I don't think it does either.
I don't think it does either. I think they get a good well, because of where their contract is now, they roughly only need about, I feel like they only need maybe, let me do the math here, maybe like $250 million a year to be above the Big Ten.
Okay.
And so obviously we know how big the Big Ten deal is. We know, you look at this, it's probably another $200 million out there. How much goes back to the ACC? Do they negotiate anything with the Pac-12 now that you're down to 10 teams? It'll be interesting. All right, last piece before we hit the break here. Brian Harsin for real got fired today.
Not a catfish.
Not a catfish, not me. Barrett Sally confirmed it. And I'm going to be honest. They haven't hired the AD. They look like they did the Mississippi State AD, which God bless that guy. Because to take it with those freaking lunatics down on the plains, who wants to coach there? Like, seriously. Like, who in their right mind would actually want to try to coach there?
Yeah. I mean, Brian Harsin has done himself zero favors in this position. Yeah. Let's go ahead and put that out there. Zero favors. At the same time, with those donors out there, it's a clown show, man.
They run everything. The thing is, it's constantly we got to get rid of people. We need to do something different. And it's just like they had Gus for close to 7-8 years, and Gus took them to a national championship. Gus had them in the running. Gus beat Alabama a few times. They're one of those programs to me that they get a little winning in them. They completely forget who they are. And then when they have a couple mediocre seasons, everybody wants to burn the place down because, it's all screwed up. You are who you are. And that's where the Mississippi State guy, God bless his soul.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that they want so bad to be like tier 1 all the time, like some of their other in-state rivals, and some of the other teams in their conference. And they need to recognize that they're a team that, because of the money that they have, they can punch up, but they're still going to be more or less a tier 2 type program consistently.
Yeah.
With the ability to punch up.
What they've done the last 11 years, though, I would take it. 2 national championship game appearances, only only 2 bad seasons. And then the rest
you can really take it even further back than that. I mean,
if you go back the last 20 years, absolutely.
You go back to 2004. I mean, they've had
really good teams. Yeah, really good teams.
I'd definitely take it.
Heartbeat.
Just because you're not that elite of elite every year. I mean, again, you punched up a few times. You've you've won the big ones that you've had to win to put yourself in a position to play in some big games.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Brian, before we get to know the enemy for NC State, we are going to take a quick pause from our digital partners.
As we take a quick break, we'd like to tell you about getting your free website report from our digital partner, Grassroots Digital Marketing Studio. They'll tell you how your website ranks on Google, on-site SEO, and social media. No commitment to buy anything. You can get your free report by visiting grassrootsdigitalstudio.com/free-website-report. Now back to the episode.
All right, Brian, let's start with Georgia Tech, know the enemy, offensive side of the ball. And let's start at the quarterback. The quarterback position.
Which one?
Well, okay, there we go. Unlike NC State, who had not really showed much of the freshmen, Georgia Tech's shown everybody since Jeff Sims got banged. you got Sims, you got Zach Gibson, and Zach Pyron. Let's go this order. Give me, obviously, Sims is one, so we'll talk about him last. Who's the least likely guy we're going to see this week? And if he does have to play, give me a quick variation of what we're going to see in his offense.
More than likely, the least likely is going to be Zach Gibson. He started the last game they played against FSU. Didn't make it very far into that game. Really more of an athlete, decent short game accuracy with his arm, effective in the running game. Only average arm strength, average accuracy, not really effective in the pocket, will panic when he's pressured consistently. So not exactly the guy you want to pull the trigger there in a game, especially against a team like the Hokies that we do have a pretty effective defense, at least for 3 quarters.
So for if it's Zach Gibson, we're going to see the smallest playbook and the actual potentially smallest person able to run their offense.
Yeah, smallest playbook, just because he doesn't have the arm to drive the ball down the field.
Okay. All right. Well, what about Pyron? Because Jeff Sims, obviously, if he's healthy, Sims is going to play and he's the best quarterback they have. But what are we seeing from Pyron?
Pyron is a step up in athleticism. He's a more powerful runner. He's got a more effective arm strength. Does a better job in the intermediate passing game than Gibson. He does still lack the arm strength to take some deep shots consistently, but he will make some effective throws in the intermediate passing game, so it does stretch the field a little bit there for them. But he is effective in that 3-step drill, and he will scramble well, keep his eyes downfield for checkdowns and things like that. So more effective, and again, probably a more effective runner in the zone read because of his size and power.
All right. And then last, clearly, if he's healthy, Jeff Sims, the 6'3", 205-pound quarterback out of Duval, Florida, composite 4-star, was a top 247 player, top 10 quarterback. So far this season, he's thrown 5 touchdowns, only rushed for 1. A little over 300 yards there. And we all, if you've been following Hokie football for the last 5 years, we know who Jeff Sims is. At one point, he was right there with us, and then he decided to go to Georgia Tech. What do we see from him that makes him, obviously, if they want him to start?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is his confidence. He's a quick decision maker, delivers a good, accurate ball that allows his receiver to kind of turn up field, get some yards after the catch. Great athlete, extends plays with his legs, looks to make the play down the field. As he's kind of escaping the pocket and getting to the perimeter. He is the type of quarterback, that I've been talking about that can elevate the play of those around him. He's that type of player. But he will take risks with the football in the passing game, so there is some opportunities for some, potential fumbles or turnovers there. But, I mean, he's definitely one of the better quarterbacks we've seen this year in terms of his skill set, and definitely the best quarterback on that roster.
Yeah. I mean, he obviously is the best. If you see him playing, you're going to get their best game offensively, which isn't the greatest, which we'll talk about later. But let's just be very honest with this team. This team is a run first team. They've ran the ball 30 more times than they've passed it because they've given up 30 sacks. They're giving up a sack about 1 every 8 dropbacks. But they have actually 2 really good running backs. And the first let's talk about here is let's talk about Hassan Hall. A transfer from Louisville, class of 2018, was a mid 3-star there from the state of Georgia at Maynard Jackson in Atlanta. And, so far this season, Brian, with Hassan, he's averaging, just over 5 yards a carry, 315 total yards. Interesting piece here is no touchdowns. So that's something to keep an eye on. And, what are you seeing from him on the tape?
Yeah, he's pretty effective catching the ball out of the backfield. Solid vision, and he's an angry runner, finishes his runs well. Good at identifying cutback lanes. That's where he kind of gets a lot of his extra yardage there. But he's not really a home run threat in the offense. He's not heavily used around the goal line. They usually focus more on um, some other guys, whether it be Sims or um, one of the other quarterbacks trying to get when they get around the goal line there. But yeah, he's one of those guys that gets you a lot of yardage kind of between the 20s.
All righty. So now they have a second running back as well. And let's talk about him next. Let's talk about Dante Smith. Smith so far this year, again, also averaging over 5 yards a carry at 5.1, 3 touchdowns, 258 total yards, a little bit of receiving, 8 receptions in 8 games. And Kame was a mid 3 star coming out of Spring Hill in Columbia, Tennessee, all purpose back. Not a lot of D1 offers, but a little bit of speed there. What makes him a little bit different than Hall?
Yeah, he's more of a perimeter threat than Hall, especially running the ball. He's primarily used as kind of their third down or change of pace back. Better blocker overall, and they do use him in some of the heavier packages around the goal line in place of Hall to kind of punch it in for 6.
All right. And just kind of looking in general with these guys, Hall is, I would say, the lead back of the two. He's out carried Smith by over 30 carries in Georgia Tech's first 8 games, so roughly getting probably 4 to 5 more touches, probably seeing the field 8 to 10 more snaps than Smith, just based on that. But obviously, Smith has the nose for the end zone where Hall doesn't. And even though we've mentioned that this is a run team, and you see Jeff Sims' numbers, he's got over 300 total rushing yards with a touchdown. They do have some receivers, and as we started kind of looking at a little bit of everybody, I thought about going to Nate McCullum, who is their leading wide receiver, but something with Malachi Carter just kind of caught my eye in a couple of his games. Couple of his games, he only had a few catches, but put up kind of bigger numbers. And I wanted to kind of get your feel on him, Brian. Was a 3-star when he came out in 2018 out of Georgia. What makes him a little different where I see a couple of those games where he kind of popped over 15 yards a carry?
Yeah, most of that's from the yards after the catch. He has good hands. He runs well after the catch. Mostly works from the outside, sometimes from the slot. Dangerous in the open field. He's not really used much in the screen game, though.
Okay.
He makes most of his hay in that kind of intermediate range. So when they are attacking a little bit more downfield, that's kind of where he makes his hay, and he does a pretty good job after the catch with some of those balls.
Yeah, so I wanted to focus on that also when Brian, when you kind of threw your notes in there, and it kind of made me think missed tackles. We've been better this year, but he's the guy we do not want to see get the ball in space and start missing tackles. He will make us pay. Yep. So I hope we can keep him under wraps for the game. But again, also listen, Nate McCullum, EJ Jenkins, just a couple other wide receiver names there. All right, Brian, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the scheme on the offense, and let's talk about the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably, especially on pass pro, this is the worst offensive line unit we've seen since BC. We need to stay aggressive and keep pressure on them to keep them frustrated. They are good when they can kind of create predictable outcomes. They're not good when you get aggressive with them. When you confuse them, they become a shell. So if we can stay aggressive the whole game and bring some pressure, especially in a game where we're not quite as worried about the downfield throws, hopefully we can hold up on the back end a little bit better than we did late against NC State. But I mean, we're looking at kind of a smash mouth spread. It's going to be heavy zone read RPO elements. They're not taking a ton of shots downfield. This is very much a run focused, run first offense. And without Sims, they're damn near a triple option team. A lot of times.
Oh
which
God.
we know about Georgia Tech and the triple option, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they really kind of become that type of almost run exclusive unless they're playing from behind type team. They were down multiple scores against FSU, and they were still, run, and then pass when they had to. So they
They were
definitely want
down.
to run the football if they're going to have success in the offense.
Well,
Um,
it shows in the stats. I mean, they're under 6
yeah, yeah,
per game. I mean, per attempt.
yeah,
Under
and
6 an attempt. That's just ugly.
yeah, and I think if we do a good job attacking that mesh point, um, that'll kind of keep things in a more predictable outcome. Make sure that we kind of let Jeff Sims give it as much as he can. Um, that would be ideal. Or put him in a no-win situation where if he gives it or keeps it, he's kind of eat up. That's kind of what we need to do. Keep him living in hell a little bit. But getting a lead on them early could really help us kind of get them out of their game plan there, because they definitely want to run the ball. They definitely want to kill clock. It's still that type of offense, even though we're not seeing that triple option, that flex bone that we saw from Georgia Tech for years
But
in
it's
the
but it's
ACC.
but it's funny you say it could get them out of their game plan, but on the other hand, they just might stay in their game plan. And if we get up 21-0, like we're just going to keep running the ball. Thank you. Like you're just going to keep running the ball and not having any success. And I mean,
Well, they
I
do well
understand.
enough, but they're not moving it consistently enough to.
Yeah,
It's like they'll have an 8 or 10 yard gain, and they'll back it up with a 2 or 3 or a 1 or 2, and sometimes a negative play, and next thing you know they're punting. So
is what it is.
that's kind of how we've got to do it. We can't let 1 or 2 first downs kind of create that tidal wave where they end up rolling into the end zone. We got to make sure that we're getting off the field.
Absolutely. All right. So next guy, Brian, we're going to flip over to defense. First guy I want to talk about, guy who started his playing career as class of 2017 at Old Dominion. He transferred into Georgia Tech. He was a 2-star when he came out of high school down in Garner, North Carolina at Garner High School. That's Keon White. And, so far this season, 4 sacks, leading the team in sacks, 35 tackles, pass deflection as well. And he's that prototypical, the build you love on him, 6'5", 286. How does he show on tape?
Really good, actually. He's kind of a guy that they use in a lot of different ways. He's got really good size, which helps him kind of slide into a 3 technique when they go with a different line set. But he's also kind of that big end that can also rush the passer well. The only thing he doesn't do great, he's not very good at shedding blocks, and for his size, he can get moved out of the gaps. But when he can shoot a gap and penetrate, that's kind of where he makes his hay, and he does a good job there. And like I said, for his size, very above average pass rusher, whether he's lined up outside the tackle or inside the tackle.
All righty. Let's flip now. Let's look at the 2 linebackers. Let's start with Charlie Thomas, first of all. Thomas out of Thomasville High School in Georgia, class of 18, a high 3-star in the state of Georgia, top 50 player down there when he came out. And so far this year, I mean, 70 total tackles, which is second on the Yellow Jackets behind one guy we'll talk about in a few minutes. He has a sack. He's forced a fumble, couple of interceptions, 6'2", 207. Where is he lining up on it with Charlie?
Yeah, so he's the position's called money. It's actually similar to the backer that we were used to in the Bud Foster system. So he's better against the run than the pass. He will blitz, but not quite as often as the guy that we're going to talk about next. Navigates the trash well to get to and attack his gap responsibility. He's inconsistent in coverage, but he's pretty solid when he can kind of read, react, and drive on a route versus having to sit back and kind of pass guys through zones or work in man. He will miss a tackle occasionally, especially when he's in pursuit. But he's really good when he's kind of playing downhill and is able to kind of square guys up.
And when you talk about the inconsistency in coverage, is it just the eyes? Are the
Yeah,
eyes? Is it just looks like the head's going everywhere versus focus on one thing? We see when I hear you say inconsistent, the first thing I think of is he's not looking at the quarterback. He's looking at the players moving around him. Where when you're in zone, it's like, look where the quarterback is. If a guy crosses you, that's fine, but you still should be there, because if you're looking at him and he comes back across the field, well, you're going to be a half a second late. You're not
yeah,
even going to be in the play.
yeah. It looks like he's thinking too much a lot of times when he's in that kind of true zone. When he's able to kind of see everything in front of him and just react to it a lot better.
Nice,
So that's
nice.
kind of what it is.
All right, now let's flip to the next guy, because I said he has 70 tackles. That's averaging 10 a game. Ayin Alai, number 2 linebacker, 6'3", 233 pounds, out of Olney, Maryland. 82 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. Just last week against FSU, he had 11 tackles, so it's been consistent all year. When he came back out in 2017, he was recruited to Maryland. He did not come originally to Georgia Tech, so he was a transfer from Maryland. And he was a 3-star. Had a good, you take a look at his list. We did show some interest in him being up at Good Counsel. It's a pretty good high school up in Maryland, but a lot of good looks for him back then. What's the tape showing? The statistics say it. Is he their best player on defense, or?
Yeah, best overall player on defense. He plays the Mac position, which is the Mike in the defense. He's got good length, plays fast, especially when he's blitzing. He does a good job of reading the play and attacking his gap. Good tackler, especially at the point of attack when he's kind of between the tackles there. Not bad in coverage, but he does struggle when covering kind of athletic players like a joker tight end or a wide receiver. And he does sometimes struggle to shed blocks. So that's kind of, if we can get him tied up in the middle there, we can kind of neutralize him a little bit.
So I hear you say that fourth statement there about covering athletic tight ends. Do you think this is a game where Gallo should be at H, put right on that kind of that wing back, and force him to cover?
Yeah, I would put him in as much force position as we can, where he's got to do stuff in space and cover in space.
Yeah. Do you
Make
think
him run? Make him run as much as possible.
All righty. Let's flip it. One last player on the defensive side of the ball, and that is LaMiles Brooks, the defensive back. LaMiles from Trinity Christian Academy. That name. Isaiah Ford. Some other good players from down there. He is the class of 2020. Yes, he did get a Virginia Tech offer. No, he did not commit. And he was a pretty highly rated player. 4-star composite, top 260 player nationally, a top 20 quarter, top 50 in Florida. We actually were a favorite to land him back in 2020. And obviously we missed there.
No, we weren't.
No, we weren't.
That deadly 2020 class, man. Still coming back to haunt us.
Still. So far this season, I love the stat line from him. To be a defensive back, 33 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 5 pass deflected. So he has been around the ball a lot this year, and also had a fumble recovery. So clearly a nose for the ball. What's Miles showing in the secondary?
Yeah, so he plays safety for this team. He's probably the best playmaker in their secondary. Really great in pursuit, making open field tackles. Finishes plays well when he has spill area responsibilities. He's good, but occasionally sloppy with those run fits. So that's something that we can potentially exploit. He's also good in coverage, but he can be exposed in one-on-one. He's much better when he's in zone.
All right, let's flip it over now, Brian, and let's talk about this scheme. Obviously, you mentioned something we were familiar with, so I'm going to assume 4-2-5.
4-2-5, but they are multiple. So you'll see them kind of mix and match fronts. They use that kind of standing DN as kind of a hybrid player that they'll slide into a backer position and then slide their Sam kind of into a more true nickel. So they kind of morph a little bit into a little bit of a 3-3, a little bit of a 3-4, kind of depending on what they need, but they're a base 4-2-5. And they try to switch up those fronts to create confusion, to create matchups that work for them. They bring pressure fairly regularly, usually kind of zone blitz in the early parts of a drive. They'll go more man blitz as they kind of get pushed further into their own territory. They force a decent amount of turnovers, usually off pressure. And they're very much kind of a bend don't break philosophy. You can score on them, but they're going to try to hold you to 3.
All right. Well, you mentioned the forced turnovers off pressure. Let's go to the Hokies, and the first thing we can talk about is their turnover margin. They are a top 5 team in the country in turnover margin with plus 12. Not a lot of plus 12 teams are 3-5. So I got nerdy and just started looking at the game films, and in their 3 wins, they're plus 7. So clearly in those wins, they turned the ball over, and that was against Western Carolina.
Duke.
I had Duke, 23-10, and Pitt. So they forced a lot of turnovers in those 3 games. So in the 5 losses, though, they still created 5 turnovers. That's a turnover a game. So I dug a little deeper. They forced 2 against UVA, and they lost by a touchdown. They had 1 in a blowout loss to Ole Miss. And they had 2 against FSU, who also blew the doors off of them. And the other 2 losses, it was an even battle. So in 3 of their losses, they were plus 5. And they got outscored by like almost 100. They have to force turnovers to win games. That's clear.
Yeah, they got to force turnovers to be competitive.
And even when they force a bunch, UVA – they forced 2 turnovers against that bad offense, came up with 7 points against not really a good defense. Even when they force, they can lose. So I sit here, Brian, and I ask you, I think we just have to be aggressive, because what they've shown is even when they force turnovers, they don't do a hell of a lot with it.
Yeah, we definitely can't revert into a shell if we make a mistake. We got to keep being aggressive, pushing the ball downfield, keep them on edge. Because, they showed against FSU, they had essentially a 6-point turnaround on one play where they forced a fumble with FSU inside their 5-yard line, and they ran it back to like the 22-yard line and only got 3 out of it. And they had another turnover later in that same quarter. FSU had 2 turnovers early and was winning the whole game. This isn't something where they do a whole lot with those turnovers. So if it happens, don't panic. Stay aggressive on offense. Stay aggressive on defense. Don't let that sudden change become 6 points.
That's it. But it's also difficult them to score points, and that's where I go to the next key. Is it's going to be our defense general. This offense is 118th in the country. They are not a good offense. They're 125th in scoring. They're below us in scoring, which says a lot.
Not good, Bob.
Even in their 3 wins, the offense has not been good at all. And their biggest scoring output was 26 versus Pitt. So you talk about a defense get-right game. We looked good for 3 quarters last week. Let's bring it 4 quarters like this team, like we did against BC, and keep them under 2 touchdowns.
Yep. Yeah, so, and the big thing is slowing that run down. If we can slow that run down, then they're not going to be a team that can do anything offensively.
So we'll see. Speaking of run games, I think the Hokies' run game is going to be a good key. Said it in the presser today. Malachi's doubtful, which gives me a sliver of hope, but also gives me a sliver of hope, too, that he won't play until he's ready. And good news about Keyshawn King, probable, so we're likely going to see him, probably a combination of Holston and Duke. But Georgia Tech, I look back at the UNC game, and talked about them being a bad offense as far as rushing the ball. Georgia Tech 101 this year, giving up over 177 yards a game. So I think between the combination of Wells, King, Holston, and Duke, I want to see at least 130 to 140 yards on 30 to 35 carries. That'll make me feel better. But maybe 3.5 is where I should be happy per attempt.
We got to do better than we did last week. And I know this is a big step. This is a big step down in terms of front and in terms of linebacker play overall. And that's not knocking the two guys. I mean, I think they're probably two of the better players on this defense, but we were looking at 3 NFL caliber linebackers last week.
We were.
And some solid players in that front.
Yep.
So we're not getting that this week.
No.
This is a big step down. We should see better this week in the running game. So if we can get, like you said, I think 135 would be a good number. 140. If we get above 150, great. But if we can get around that 135, 140 range, at or just above 3.5 a carry, I think that'll be effective enough, especially if we're being aggressive and pushing the ball downfield in the passing game.
Absolutely. Let's go back and talk about what we talked about earlier. The biggest key to this game, and hopefully growing some confidence with this team, is we've got to string the multiple quarters of productive football across all elements.
Yep.
It's what we're missing. We can attest to it and probably say, if you string a couple extra quarters in Pitt, in Miami, and one more quarter in NC State, it's 3 wins versus 3 losses. The team's 5-2.
Yep,
and that's it.
Let's look at NC State. We had 2 bad quarters of special teams play. We had 2.5 bad quarters of offense, and we had 1 bad quarter of defense.
Yep. And all came at separate points during the game.
Yep.
Offense early when the defense was humming. Defense and offense together in the third quarter. You outscore a team 21-7. That's big. That's what you want every quarter. And then the special teams, I think it was first and fourth weren't as good. But it's just stringing the quarters together, because that builds momentum. That builds confidence. You see guys play better. And I think a team like this that do not have the firepower to hit you back quick, it's kind of what the Hokies need. And Brian, let's flip it over and let's talk about predictions on this game. And unfortunately for me and you, for a while now, we've been going against the Hokies. And what's your feels this week?
Well, I'm not going against the Hokies this weekend. I've got an actual repeat of last year's final score.
All right.
I think that we're going to be effective driving the football. I think we probably don't close as many drives as we'd like to, but we're effective enough moving the football against this defense. I think we give up a couple scores to them, but then we kind of settle in, and we finish this off. I've got 26-17 Hokies.
All right. And I'm not far behind you, because I do hope that we can continue our streak of picking these games correctly. I'm going a little less than you on both sides. I think it's 24-10 Hokies. I think what we saw last week with that defense, NC State has some playmakers. We talked about that. They were missing the quarterback, and I think what they found last week was likely the guy that's going to succeed, Leary, when he steps away. And I really think defensively, I can't see watching Georgia Tech a few times this year. They just look pitiful offensively. And with no real threat of a passing game, I think Brent Pry probably can feel comfortable playing some guys he may not be as comfortable with. And I think we pull the W. And I think it's going to feel nice on Saturday afternoon as we sit down and crack a game for our big screener. We're not picking separate games this week. There is only one game. In the AP, they're 1-2. In the CFP, they're 1-3. And that's Georgia versus Tennessee. And that's obviously Hendon Hooker. Georgia is a 8-point favorite down in Athens between the hedges. The over-under is 66. And this has been one I've been just thinking about, sitting at the baseball game, even thinking about it. Umpire has a son that's a Tech fan, or not a Tech fan, excuse me, a Tech student, a senior up there. And I think what I'm going to have to say is I think I'm going to take Tennessee to win the game outright. And I am going to go over the 66.
Okay.
And I think what I'm kind of feeling in this situation is something like a 38, 33 game where it's going to be a war. But let me get your predictions first, and then I want to kind of hit what we talked about earlier about this game.
Okay. I am going to go 34-31. I'm taking Tennessee to win outright, and then the under just barely hits.
Barely. You're going to be sweating that if it really is 31-34 late. But let's talk about what we talked about, Brian, when we were discussing this game, because we talked about this game for 15 minutes today. And I said to you, if Tennessee gets up 2 scores early, do you have the confidence that Georgia can firepower back?
I think they can, but it's not a sure thing, right? Because we've seen up and down ability in that area.
Kent State.
Yeah. So, it's really hard to say, do they have that in them? When we look at we were talking about taking out the outliers earlier. And Kent State's kind of one of the outliers there for Georgia. And we said,
Mizzou is the big outlier.
Yeah, Mizzou is the other outlier there.
Because if I got Georgia fans listening to this, y'all were saved by the refs that night. There were some penalties that happened that if the flag had been thrown, a couple extra scores wouldn't have happened, and Georgia would be a one-loss team right now. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
When your right tackle clearly false starts on 3rd and goal and you get a touchdown from it, that helps out with a 4-point game.
Big time.
But we mentioned it the other way, because I think if Georgia gets up early, I think they are running so vertical. They are so attacking downfield with Heupel's offense. If they get down early, I think they're just going to keep slinging it and keep slinging it. And I think to a point where we've seen sometimes with Kirby Smart, he'll get into those mans. He wants to play man. He wants to be aggressive up front. Bo Nix ain't quite Hendon Hooker. And I think the wide receiver core at Tennessee is a little bit better. But, I think it's going to be a hell of a game. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch. Thank God the Hokie game will be over so we can enjoy it versus keeping looking on our other one here. All right.
Yeah, and I think when you see that, I think if Georgia wants to pull it out, I feel like Georgia's going to have to get to Hendon consistently. That's going to be the only way that they're going to pull it out.
And if they're doing that and they miss him, there's going to be a lot of space for him to run. And we know that he can run. All right, big man. Has anything broken almost 11:20 on Tuesday night?
90 minutes on the dot here.
90 minutes on the dot. We did it. Baseball game is – let's see that score real quick before we wrap here. Baseball game's over, and the Astros got shut out 7-0.
Ouch.
Couldn't
have happened to a better team.
Uh-oh. Man, don't let Doug hear that.
When you got a Braves fan kind of like pulling for the Phillies, it's some foul shit going down. So.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner podcast, brought to you by the Main Street Pharmacy in Blacksburg. I am Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler.
Visit our website, boundarycornerbt.com, to listen to all of our episodes. While you are there, do not forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe on our YouTube account and also any of your podcast sources. Amazon, Spotify, Apple. Also, as always, check out our buddy Jason Long, where on November 5th, he will be at the first annual Ginkgo Tree Festival down in Roanoke. So check him out there if you get a chance. Also, check out his music on Apple, Spotify, YouTube account, Facebook pages. Check out his summer EP album. Yes, I'm tired. I'm going to be going to sleep very shortly here. It was a long night last night with Halloween. I got 9 pounds of candy in there that the kids are diving into. I should have probably ate at least 1 bar.
Yeah, you needed a sugar rush after the game.
I did. I had a Dr. Pepper. I couldn't eat chocolate, man. But
little DP,
little DP cherry, little DP cherry, really good. Also, really good with a little whiskey. So we thank you all for always listening. Shout out to Dwight, Robbie, listening tonight. I know some of y'all are out there as well. We appreciate it. As always, Brian, let's go.
Hokies.
Each day I wonder all the crawls and holy ground. Don't fit in me. For must admit, I've seen the bottom